Okay, so everyone's got the same mental image of a shark, right? Silent, solo, cutting through open water alone. No crew, no attachments, just vibes and teeth. That's basically the entire cultural personality we've assigned them. Lone predator. Doesn't need anybody. Kind of a menace, honestly, but a respectable one. We built an entire genre of movies around this idea. One shark, no backup, coming for you specifically. Like it woke up and chose violence alone. Turns out, that's mostly wrong. And not wrong in a small way, wrong in a we've been telling this story for decades and it's just not true way. Which is kind of embarrassing for us, if we're being honest. Yeah. We really just decided sharks were loners because it made for a better horror movie premise, and then never checked. Not once, for decades. That's kind of insane when you actually sit with it. Researchers tagging reef sharks and lemon sharks started noticing something that made zero sense if sharks were the loners we thought they were. The same individuals kept showing up near the same other individuals, over and over. Not randomly, not just because there happened to be food in the same spot. The same shark hanging around the same handful of other sharks day after day, sometimes for years. That's, kind of weird, right? Like, sharks aren't supposed to have a usual crowd, but they do. Scientists started calling these persistent groupings social communities, which is a very clinical way of saying sharks have friend groups. Lemon sharks in particular have been observed forming preferences, associating more with certain individuals than others, forming loose but repeated social bonds that last well beyond a single hunting trip or a single mating season. Some studies tracking reef sharks found individuals returning to the same social clusters across multiple years, like showing up to the same friend group reunion, except the friend group is a bunch of apex predators and the reunion venue is a coral reef. And this wasn't just one lucky data set either. Researchers used something called social network analysis, the exact same math people use to study human friendship circles and who's friends with who on Facebook, and just pointed it at sharks instead. Nodes and edges, clusters and outliers, the whole thing. And the graphs came back looking eerily similar to human social networks. Some sharks were hypersocial hubs connected to a ton of other individuals. Some were loners within the loners, barely showing up in anyone's circle. Sound familiar? Because that's just every high school, honestly. And it gets weirder. It gets better. Young lemon sharks, when raised in tanks with the same group of peers, actually perform better at learning tasks when they're around familiar individuals versus strangers. Being around your friends apparently makes you smarter, or at least less stressed, which, honestly, tracks for basically every social animal, including us. There's also this thing with hammerheads. Some populations gather in huge schools, sometimes hundreds of individuals, circling together near seamounts, and for a long time nobody really knew why. Because they're not hunting together, they're not migrating in a straightforward way, they're just there, together, in a massive loose formation that looks a lot less like predators converging on prey and a lot more like a really big group hang. Divers who've come across these schools describe it as almost eerie. Hundreds of apex predators, completely calm, completely non-aggressive toward each other, just cruising in formation, like it's a slow Sunday. Nurse sharks do something similar, but way more chill. They'll pile up together in shallow reef caves during the day, literally stacked on top of each other, resting shark on resting shark, in what researchers half-jokingly call shark piles. Which, come on, that's not predator behavior, that's a group nap. And by the way, if this kind of thing genuinely fascinates you, hit like and subscribe, because Blorpin's got a lot more of these. So here's the actual reframe. Sharks aren't loners who occasionally tolerate other sharks. A lot of species are running on something closer to a real social structure. Preferences, familiarity, repeated associations, maybe even something you could squint at and call trust. Not
warm and fuzzy trust, obviously. It's still a shark. It will still eat something smaller than it without a second thought. But social trust in the sense of, I know this individual, I've swum near it 100 times, it hasn't killed me yet, we're good.
Which, okay, that's a weirdly relatable bar for friendship if you think about it too hard. There's even evidence some of these social bonds cross generations. Mother sharks and their offspring showing up in overlapping social clusters years later, long after the point where the mother would have stopped providing any direct care. Which means it's not even just convenient proximity because we're related. It's something closer to a lingering social tie, the kind that outlasts the practical reason it started. Kinda hits different when you say it about a shark instead of a person. Here's the twist, because there's always a twist. Humans do the exact same social sorting, we just dress it up nicer. We call it our friend group, our people, the ones we click with. But strip away the vocabulary, and it's the same underlying mechanism a lemon shark is running near a mangrove nursery. Repeated proximity, familiarity reducing stress, a preference for certain individuals over the anonymous crowd. We didn't invent picking our people. We just added inside jokes to it. And honestly, the part that gets me is how long we assumed the opposite about sharks specifically. Like, we looked at an animal that's clearly running some version of social bonding and went, nah, definitely a loner. Definitely doesn't need anybody, very cold, very solo. Mostly because it doesn't smile, it doesn't cuddle, it doesn't do any of the things we've decided friendship is supposed to look like. Which says more about our assumptions than it does about sharks. We basically judged an entire evolutionary lineage's social life based on facial expressions it doesn't have. No eyebrows, no smile, no tail wag, so we assumed nothing was going on in there. Turns out that's just bad science, dressed up as intuition. Think about it from the shark side for a second. Not that a shark is thinking about anything, but hypothetically, it swum near this one other individual 100 times, never got attacked, never had to compete hard for the same patch of reef. That's not nothing biologically. That's a relationship, just built out of repetition instead of affection. Psychologists and behavioral ecologists who study social bonding across species keep landing on the same basic idea. Familiarity is one of the oldest currencies in the animal kingdom. Knowing an individual, recognizing it, predicting it, trusting it not to be a threat is so metabolically valuable that it shows up again and again across completely unrelated species. Elephants do it, dolphins do it, obviously, given whistle names and all that. Crows do it. And apparently, quietly, unbothered, sharks have been doing it too, this whole time, while we made movies about how terrifying and alone they are. Which, kind of a wild PR problem for sharks, honestly. They've spent decades being cast as the ocean's scariest loner, and the whole time, there's been actual peer-reviewed data sitting around saying, hey, some of these guys have besties. Nobody read the study. Everybody watched the movie.
So next time someone says sharks are cold-blooded loners, I mean, technically, sure, cold-blooded is just biology, but loners? Kinda not the flex people think it is. There's a lemon shark somewhere near a Bahamian mangrove that has literally been swimming near the same handful of individuals for years, quietly running its own version of a friend group. No group chat required, no plans made, just showing up to the same water and recognizing the same neighbors, over and over, for years. And maybe that's the actual lesson here, weirdly. We keep looking for friendship to look like ours. Hugs, words, plans, effort. And when an animal doesn't perform it the way we do, we write it off as doesn't have that. But friendship, at its most basic biological level, might just be this: showing up near the same individual, over and over, and choosing not to leave. A shark does that near a reef. We do it in a group chat. Same instinct, just very, very different vibes.
So yeah, solo predator, terrifying, definitely still don't get in the water with one uninvited. But loner? Nah, that one's on us.
Should Blorpin cover the elephant that never forgets a face next, or the crow that holds a grudge for actual years? Drop your vote below. Seriously, I actually read these. That's the Blorpin theory. And honestly, it's a good one. Kind of proud of this one. Stay curious.